Sometimes the line between life and tragedy comes down to a chance encounter or one astonishing coincidence. Today we're exploring real-world stories where crime and fate collided so dramatically, it's as if the universe took over. Moments so improbable they defy rational explanation. These are heart-wrenching, uncanny tales. A single random meeting that solved a murder. A piece of evidence discovered in the most unlikely place. Or two strangers connected by a twist that changes everything. And if you found our last episode shocking, get ready. This one dives into emotional territory that will make you question if chance might just be the most powerful detective of all. Stay with me until the very end, because our final chapter recounts a story so tear-jerking it forced hardened investigators to break down in tears. If you love probing the deeper, more unpredictable side of true crime, subscribe now so you don't miss next Saturday's episode, where we explore the darkest vigilante cases, stories where ordinary citizens took extreme measures for justice. In 2015, a grieving father named Michael Turner was sifting through a donation bin at a local thrift store in Nebraska, searching for winter clothes. He opened a battered duffel bag, only to find an old, crumpled photograph that nearly stopped his heart. The girl in the picture had a birthmark on her cheek, exactly like the daughter Michael had lost 6 years prior under suspicious circumstances. Years earlier, his 6-year-old Abby vanished along with her estranged mother. Police initially suspected a custody dispute, but as time went on, investigators feared foul play. Michael never got answers. Yet in a random thrift store donation, he discovered a personal item that clearly belonged to Abby, a small stuffed bunny with her name stitched inside. That improbable find reignited the cold case. Investigators examined the duffel bag, identified the items, and connected them to an abandoned storage unit in another state. Following that lead, they located Abby's mother, who had been living under a fake name in Colorado. Abby was alive, hidden under an alias, told that her father was dead. The emotional reunion brought tears to the entire police station. Michael had never expected to see his daughter's face again. But an accidental rummage through a second-hand donation bin turned out to be the key to solving a missing child case that had haunted him for years. Investigators called it the thrift store miracle, a pure stroke of fate that overcame the complexities of a case once dismissed as hopeless. In 2009, a crime reporter named Lisa Moreno stopped at a small roadside cafe in rural Georgia after covering a grim homicide story. Exhausted, she sat next to a weary older man who struck up conversation, speaking about regrets and guilt. His words were vague at first, but soon he admitted to something chilling. Years before, he had killed someone and buried the body on his family's old property, never telling a soul. Lisa thought it was just a depressed traveller spinning tall tales, but the man offered unsettling details, specific dates, the victim's clothing, and a hidden locket. As if unburdening himself, he wept quietly, placed a folded note in Lisa's hand, then left. The note contained an address and a single line, "I can't carry this anymore." Shaken, Lisa brought it to the nearest sheriff's office. Investigators found the property deserted, but thorough searching revealed a shallow grave behind a dilapidated barn. Inside, they recovered a skeleton with a rusted locket matching the man's description. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to a young drifter reported missing 3 decades earlier. The older man's identity was never confirmed. He vanished that day from the cafe. Some speculated he had terminal illness and sought redemption before dying. This emotionally charged confession, spontaneous and seemingly random, cracked open a decades-cold mystery. For the victim's surviving relatives, it brought closure they never dreamed of receiving. A chance meeting, one short conversation, and an aching conscience collided to right a terrible wrong. The investigators, hardened by years of homicide cases, called it the last confessional, a rare instance where coincidence and a stranger's final sigh of guilt ended a mystery once thought unsolvable. In 2018, a peculiar case baffled detectives in Chicago. Two men, each named Jonathan Blake, were arrested on the same night for unrelated minor offences. One, Jonathan, was found with a stolen wallet, the other was picked up for a petty fight outside a bar. Routine booking meant standard fingerprint checks. That's when the system flagged an active warrant for a murder case from 2003. The name matched, the physical description nearly identical, but the suspect was said to have a distinctive scar on his left arm. Neither Jonathan confessed to any knowledge of the murder, but upon deeper questioning, each shared uncanny life parallels. Both had grown up in neighbouring suburbs, lost parents young, and parted ways with siblings. It got more shocking when one mentioned a curious birthmark in the shape of a crescent, exactly where the scar was described. Investigators realized the 2003 suspect had used multiple aliases. A swirl of confusion followed. Was it a case of stolen identity or a bizarre mix-up? Eventually they discovered one of these. Jonathan's was indeed the 2003 murder suspect who'd used his twin as an alibi in the past. The other was an innocent man unknowingly living the same city blocks. Their mothers had been close family friends decades before, and as children they even shared the same daycare. Through a labyrinth of confusion, law enforcement pinned the real murderer by matching old DNA from the 2003 crime scene. The innocent Jonathan wept in relief while the guilty Jonathan faced a reopened murder charge. The emotional weight of this improbable coincidence, two near lookalikes, same name, same city, solidified into a cautionary tale. The line between coincidence and orchestrated cover-ups can be razor thin, but serendipity can still unveil the truth. In 2016, a worker at a Goodwill processing center in Florida opened a battered cardboard box to find a collection of old personal items, family photos, an antique watch, and among them a blood-stained letter with partial admissions about a homicide. The center's manager called the police, believing it could be a grim joke. But the letter was oddly detailed, referencing a missing person from 1998 and describing where the body was buried. Investigators ran the victim's name through their system. Sure enough, a missing person case from 1998 matched those details. The letter included directions to a remote orchard property. Acting on it, they discovered a buried set of human remains. While the note wasn't signed, it mentioned specific relatives, leading law enforcement to a suspect who once lived near that orchard. The emotional twist: the orchard caretaker was the victim's ex-partner. He admitted to killing her in a fit of rage years ago. Overwhelmed by guilt, he scribbled a confession but never intended for it to be found. It was apparently boxed with old possessions and unknowingly donated by a family member cleaning out his attic. The impossible coincidence, a random Goodwill worker opening that particular box, broke open an 18-year mystery. The caretaker surrendered tearfully, finally releasing the burden he'd carried. A single donation, never meant to be recognized, changed everything, giving closure to a victim's family who had grieved with no answers for nearly 2 decades. While these coincidences often catch criminals, sometimes they liberate the wrongly accused. In 2007, James Carter sat in a Kansas prison for a violent robbery homicide. He'd maintained his innocence for years, claiming he was 40 miles away caring for his ailing grandmother at the time of the crime. But no one believed him. The evidence was circumstantial, yet convincing enough for a conviction. Then, in an entirely separate burglary arrest in neighboring Missouri, Police took a suspect's fingerprints. The system flagged a perfect match to prints from Carter's alleged homicide scene. Investigators were stunned. Carter's prints weren't found at the time, yet the crime scene data was incomplete and prosecutors had argued he must have worn gloves. Now the new burglary suspect's prints matched exactly the partial prints that had always been in the database but misfiled. Retesting led to rechecking ballistic and fibre evidence. Eventually it revealed Carter had nothing to do with the homicide. DNA from a discarded cigarette butt at the original scene matched the new suspect. Carter was exonerated, tears streaming as he left prison, hugging his grandmother who'd grown frail in the interim. An improbable overlap of one suspect's burglary led authorities to discover the real killer, freeing an innocent man who thought he'd never see justice. Investigators called it the fingerprint twist, a testament to how a random arrest can unearth lost truths, delivering heartbreak and relief in equal measure. In 2021, a retired detective in Oregon found a tattered handkerchief embroidered with the initials CD while sorting personal boxes for a neighborhood yard sale. Something about it felt too personal, like it contained a story. The detective recognized those initials from an unsolved child kidnapping case he'd worked 3 decades earlier, where a 4-year-old, Charlotte D., was taken from her front yard. He checked old case files, confirming that a handmade pink handkerchief with the same initials was among the child's missing items. Despite retiring, he reached out to his old colleagues and they traced the item through an estate sale. Pushing forward with genealogical tools, they discovered Charlotte was actually living under a different name in Montana, entirely unaware of her past. She'd been raised by her abductors, believing she was their biological daughter. The emotional whiplash was immense. Learning the identity she held for 30 years was a lie, but the unstoppable chain of coincidences, the detectives rummaging, the estate sale record, the old case memories, brought father and daughter face to face again. Their tearful reunion captured the hearts of local communities. The father, who'd never stopped praying for his little Charlotte, collapsed in tears upon hugging her at the station. The detective wept too, stating, "I never believed that simple piece of cloth could unravel a lifetime of sorrow." It stands as a testament that even the smallest tokens, discovered by pure happenstance, can bring resolution to tragedies that once seemed permanently unsolvable. These cases defy reason. A father finding his daughter through a thrift store donation. A guilt-ridden stranger confessing in a cafe, identical men crossing paths, a murderer undone by a rummage box, an innocent man freed by a random fingerprint match, and a child returning home because of a single pink handkerchief. Each story feels surreal, as if cosmic threads pulled strangers and evidence together at the perfect and most heartbreaking moment. We often say criminals might outsmart people, but they can't outsmart fate. Sometimes the simplest item becomes a key to unlocking entire lives of deception or heartbreak. These stories remind us that behind cold investigations are real souls, real families, and unimaginable emotional outcomes. Which story touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you found these revelations overwhelming or inspiring, be sure to subscribe now. Next Saturday's episode dives into the darkest vigilante cases, where ordinary citizens took justice into their own hands with jaw-dropping consequences. And remember, sometimes a single coincidence can triumph over the most carefully planned crime. And in those moments we realize that for all our illusions of control, fate and chance can still change everything. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Stay safe and hold your loved ones close.